When you begin to aggrandize what you see, you're on your way. I call this the problem at the fork of the road. Maybe we got to the fork of the road and went down the wrong road, somebody else's direction other than our own. We have to love ourselves well enough to choose our own direction, love our own history, because the relationship of a people to their history is the same as the relationship of a child to its mother. And no people are whole until they find their role in history, the role they have played, the role they are playing, so that they'll know the role they still must play and where they still must go. I think the situation is in our hands, and I think we're equal to it. All we have to do is believe it.
Professor Clarke, when the sister was talking a few moments ago, and to pick up on your comment about maybe we went down the wrong road, when a person begins to wake up through the kind of knowledge and information that people like yourself, Dr. Ben, and others provide, and the reality sinks in of what's been done to you and to your people. The sister's expression of grabbing the Uzi is one that probably a lot of people can empathize with.
It's the first reaction.
What do you do with that anger?
Too. I had a fantasy that I think was the highest point of my life once, is to have a machine gun and mow down a lynch mob. Free the man about to be lynched. But that once you discover yourself, you get angry with the people who kept you from it.
How do you deal with that anger?
You deal with it creatively. You systematically begin to expose yourself to the literature that will tell you the real truth. Then you walk with the real truth, which is your new strength. And once you start, it becomes an addiction. It's the best addiction you can have.
All right, we're live from the world-famous Apollo Theater and Talk Radio 1190 WLIB. We're alternating between our live audience and the telephone lines. Telephone line, you're in the air. Go right ahead, please. Good afternoon.
Yeah, Hotep. Good afternoon. And good afternoon to the family.
Good afternoon.
I just want to say, to ask Dr. Clarke, how can we as conscious Africans here and in the diaspora arm ourselves against white supremacy, given the neutralization that's being rendered? Like, for instance, I've noticed that it seems to me that every time white supremacy is being magnified, it seems that the tactics are used promoting, be it racial harmony or like black and white togetherness. It just seems that every time that that white supremacy being like the curriculum inclusion, every time it's being addressed, there's always neutralization tactics. As a matter of fact, I was watching a movie on Monday, which it seemed that they were trying to neutralize the brother, all throughout by making like this white guy his best, being his real friend, which to me he wasn't, and then this white girl being his person that he could trust. And I'm just saying that how do we as African people now fall victim to the neutralization or the divide and conquer that's subtle being planted out there?
Let's let Dr. Clarke respond to your remarks.
The decoration on every trap is so attractive. Sometimes you're in the trap before you discover it is a trap. It requires constant alertness. And once you have some self-knowledge and self-direction, you can know when you're walking into it and know when your values are being falsely chosen. I'll give you an example of how one moment of overexcitement I copped out. I was in West Africa on a bus, and the bus veered away from the sea, then Togo. And I saw an African woman basket on her head, child on her back, bare breast, the sunset and the beautiful sun hitting her, accentuating that beautiful velvety blackness. And I said, looking back at her, oh God, send me a Michelangelo. somebody must capture this picture. That's the one person who could spoil that picture. You see how your values can get mixed up? Now, what did Michelangelo do with a beautiful picture like that? Except the Europeans always think nakedness is vulgar. Because he had the poor concept of sex and poor concept of women. But you have to watch yourself in order to make sure that you're on the right track. Our greatest problem right now is most of our values.
But how do we get off?
And measurement comes from other people. We just get off it by getting off of it. I will not be measured by your standard because your standard had even liberated you. So what makes me think it's going to liberate me?
Dr. Clarke, there's a place in this caller's question that I'd like to maybe have you expand on, and that is that when we look at countries like Japan and see George Bush, for example, now President Bush going to Japan, and I think as someone from Japan said it, begging at the table to a great extent. But the fact of the matter is that we don't necessarily see people from other cultures asked to compromise their culture in order to take their place in the world. They are a part of the world League of Nations, if you will, whether it be in trade or whatever else, but they're never asked to water down their particular cultural integrity to be a part of that. How do we maintain that?
We're the only ones that's called to check your culture at the door. We're the only one that's asked that. And we have to ask, we come in with our culture or we walk it alone. Now, the Japanese recovered not only because America helped to build their industries, but because they never left their culture. And we made a wrong mistake with integration. A lot of blacks thought being integrated means you have to stop eating cornbread. We misunderstood the whole thing. We have to value those things which we created. But to step back and take a good look at ourselves and what we are doing to ourselves. We have to move I don't know, this is going to be the biggest revolution we're going to go through is removing the white images from our church.
Let's go right to our live audience. Go right ahead, brother.
Out up to the family, to you, Gary, and especially to you, Dr. Clarke. My question is based on the book Stolen Legacy. I was born in Georgetown, Guyana, and living there and going to part of my schooling was in Guyana. When I came to this country, a lot of the things that I started hearing, I was a bit confused because I haven't been told the truth in Guyana about Africans and about great people. When I came here, I began to really get more confused. I go to school in Chicago right now, and I was fortunate to meet John G. Jackson. And he told me, when I asked him about George G. James and the book Stolen Legacy, he said that you would probably be one of the few people, if not the only person alive today, that will be able to speak about his death.
No, I think Dr. Ben is really the better thought on George G. James. He actually met George G. James physically. He has written a small pamphlet on George G. James.
Mm-hmm. And so maybe he was thinking about Dr. Ben.
I could speak about the significance of his work, but his death is something Dr. Ben seems to know about.
Maybe when because I go and see Dr. Jackson very regular because he's in a nursing home and a lot of
I know. Jackson was one of my early mentors, and when I came to New York at the age of 18, he'd already written his book, Was Jesus Christ a Negro, and the African origins of the legends of the Garden of Eden, and he would later write Pagan Origins of the Christ Myth. We were in the old Harlem History Club together.
Didn't you write the introduction to one of his books on
I wrote the introduction to African Civilization.
Right. But when I kept pushing for an answer, and then he told me, well, what he was told, based on what you may have mentioned to him, is that he was part of a Mason, and that he disappeared, and supposedly what people said, rumors that they cut his tongue out for talking information he should not have said.
I don't
Dr.
think
Ben,
yeah.
Dr. Ben is the one that had the best information on.
And the remark that
George
you're speaking of, not the specific remark about the tongue being cut out, I haven't heard that part, but Dr. Ben has referred to the fact that in relationship to his death that there was something related to information that was revealed. Dr. Ben has said that before publicly. All right, we'll take a break and we'll come right back. The GBE, we're live, the world famous Apollo Theater. Professor John Henrik Clarke is with us. We'll come back right after these commercial messages.
That arrogant zit on your cheek is counting on your famous tendency to stall. Surprise it. Don't procrastinate it, oxecute it. Yes, Oxy 10, so strong it starts working the instant it hits a zit. Used as directed, Oxy helps clear zits away or you don't pay. Promise. For guaranteed details, call 1-800-950-1103. Don't procrastinate it, oxecute it with Oxy 10.
What do you think of new Cineburst gum?
I never seen nothing that color before.
Words can't describe it, my man.
Those flavor crystals frighten me.
Wow! Whoosh. But wait, did I say outstanding?
Cineburst crunches. That could be a violation in this state. I'll get back to you.
New Cineburst with flavor crystals. May not be suitable for adults.
My friends all got the college loan blues.
Allow you to make forecasts and predictions into the future based upon the system that you're dealing with. And what was interesting a few minutes ago when Dr. Clarke talked about the African humanity. And I think that has really began to be the real key for me. I've heard Dr. Clarke talk about that before. And what it led to in terms of my search is that we must begin to understand our nature as a people and understand the nature of the European. And that what happens is that your nature projects your laws and your person by your nature. And when you go to the library and look at a dictionary, you know, and I did, you know, this is a European definition of nature. What he talks about is the inherent character or basic constitution of a person or thing, or the basic constitution of persons. And when I began to then go back to the United States Constitution and then recognize that you have a movement afoot now to export the United States Constitution into Africa. Liberia has provisions of the United States Constitution. Zimbabwe, Thurgood Marshall, I think, went over and did the Constitution for Ghana, you know, all based upon this particular model, which is really frightening to those countries because just as a general proposition, there are two key aspects of the United States Constitution which projects itself into American society and into American institutions. And they are fraud and deceit and prejudice. And if you analyze all of the events that we have been involved in, they will always reduce themselves to Europeans engaging in fraud and deceit and prejudice. And so it is not new that you have a David Duke phenomenon because prejudice is embedded in the American institution. And prejudice will never go away from the American institution because it has always been the European nature to be biased. You see, it has been his nature to engage in fraud and deceit. And when you examine his legal institutions, which governs all of the other institutions, then you can understand and appreciate that particular nature. So once we begin to really understand the nature of the European and reflected through his laws, then we can begin to make significant predictions as to our own status here in this country. And you know, earlier this morning I heard some of your callers call in and people were frustrated about the whole color line. And what people don't understand is that there are two weapons that he uses, the weapons of division, which is a part of arithmetic. He uses scientifically, but he has tainted science, you see, to carry out his purposes. So he uses division to divide, and he also uses subtraction, you know, taking away from your assets, taking you away, you know, taking your children away, you know, but it's always engaged in those two models. So, and that's embedded. So you always know that it's always going to be division, or it's always going to be subtraction. It's always going to be a color line, you know, and that he uses sex as a weapon. You see, that's what we have to begin to understand. It's not a love tool. It is a weapon. And he has construed his Constitution now in cases like Loving versus Virginia, not because he had changed his attitude about us, but because he wanted to use a weapon so that we can begin to produce these children, you see, that have a different color, and to begin to divide us and make arguments among ourselves as to our color lines.
We're going to break for a moment. When we come back, I want to pick up more on this, and Dr. Clarke maybe can join us on that side of the discussion too, because there's something that you mentioned in the first session that we had on this issue of global white supremacy, and that was the Dred Scott case. And you had a rather interesting perspective about that being a pivotal case in terms of how we understand law and history. We'll come back and we'll talk about that inside the GBE with our guests, Attorney Alton Maddox and Dr. John Henrik Clarke, right after this from Talk Radio 1190 WLIB, the GBE live at the Apollo.
McDonald's announces that due to popular demand, new Mighty Wings are still available. We've already had several additional reports of people succumbing to Mighty Wings mania. Symptoms include a pronounced craving for meaty, crunchy, spicy chicken wing sections served with tangy hot sauce, plus reoccurring thoughts that time is running out. Final stages of Mighty Wings mania include a quivering of the voice, an irrepressible fidgetiness, and an uncontrollable urge to head for McDonald's to satisfy the craving at participating McDonald's for a limited time.
Ooh, if you're having trouble deciding where to go for great food and great value, the choice is easy. McDonald's. Now, enjoy a sizzling regular hamburger for only 59 cents or a juicy cheeseburger for just 69 cents. So the choice is simple. Just head for McDonald's and order a 59-cent hamburger. No, you know what? Make that a 69-cent cheeseburger. Wait, now, see, I'm not sure because I don't know what I want, but one thing is for
Based on independent operator participation, prices may vary, plus tax may be higher in Manhattan or other New York metropolitan areas.
It's the sports event of the year, the first Caribbean American Sports Award function, recognizing and honoring outstanding Caribbean American sports clubs and personalities. Join Carib News and WLIB as they present the Caribbean American Sports Award Program under the distinguished patronage of the Consuls General of the Caribbean and sponsored by Guinness Gold. The grand event is on Sunday, November 10th at the Vista Hotel, 3 World Trade Center, starting at 4 p.m. Awards will be presented in all sports to clubs and individuals. Come celebrate with sports best on Sunday, November 10th. The Caribbean American Sports Awards Program. For information and reservations, call 212-944-2033. 212-944-2033. Proceeds are in aid of providing equipment and facilities to improve the quality of sports. The program has been sanctioned by the New York Sports Commission and presented by Carib News and WLIB and sponsored by Guinness Gold.
Hey, cool, brother. Way cool.
Hey, who turned down the thermostat?
Iceberg off the starboard bow. Way fresh. Easy, cool. It's like a meat locker in here. Well, doesn't that just frost your...
We just thought you'd like to know what your taste buds are doing every time you pop a stick of delicious, cool Trident fresh mint gum into your mouth. Trident, good for your teeth and great taste, too.
Not fit for man nor beast out here. Let's build an igloo. been brought to you by the WLIB Family Card Program for Community Development. Nation building begins with discipline. Keep your communities clean. Remind your children to place their bottles, cans, and other disposable items in a receptacle, not on the street. Take time to teach our youth the basics, the importance of keeping our neighborhoods clean, voting, and supporting businesses that support your community. Remember, the youth hold the keys to the door of our progress as a people. This has been a Family Card Conscious Consumer Tip from WLIB, the station that cares about you, because it's good to keep the business in the family.
Gary Bird.
We're back live from the world-famous Apollo Theater at Talk Radio 1190. Sister Soldier puts it together. Slavery back in effect. Some say it is in motion, and not such a strange idea that we see a David Duke on the horizon with an attempt, in this case, and a strategy to move from the governor's chair to the presidency, of course, and the White House. This November 6, 1991, it's 23 minutes before 2 o'clock. I'm going to have Gary Bird, my guest inside the program today, as we talk a bit about what you'll be hearing tonight at the Slave Theater with a program called Effects of Global White Supremacy, Part 2. Dr. John Henrik Clarke will be talking from the historical perspective. Attorney Alton Maddox will speak from the legal. And also joining us tonight will be Dr. Amos Wilson, who will talk from the psychological perspective. Let's bring our guests back to the world-famous Apollo Theater this afternoon. We're also about 20 minutes away from Mark Rowley's Mark Time, coming up after news at the top of the hour, of course. Before the half-hour break, Attorney Maddox and Dr. Clarke, I was asking the question really about something that came up in the last presentation at the Slave, where Attorney Maddox, you pointed towards the Dred Scott case, and if I remember correctly, you indicated that you were able to continually use the Dred Scott case in your own work, and I'd like you to talk a bit about your feeling of it being an important and pivotal case for all of us to understand.
Well, I think one of the things that we have to do, Gary, we as a people talk about our ancestors, and I think that we give great deference to our ancestors. We have to also understand that the Europeans respect their ancestors, and that if their ancestors lay a certain foundation, they're not going to betray that foundation. And so the foundation in this country was in this United States Constitution, and we know where we fit in that particular Constitution, and there have been efforts made continuously to mask their intentions, but the basic thrust of that Constitution remains alive and well today. The opportunity to construe the United States Constitution in Dred Scott, where Justice Taney said that no Negro had any right that whites are bound to respect. Now that was before the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments came into effect. Then, in a case called Giles versus Harris, which followed Plessy versus Ferguson. Plessy versus Ferguson was a case that talked about separate but unequal in effect. Giles versus Harris was decided in 1901, and it was basically a case of some Alabama blacks trying to stop being disenfranchised. And in effect, Justice Holmes, who was sitting for the majority, said at that time that we cannot enforce rights that white people do not want to exist. All right, aside from the Constitution, it's not a question of your rights being embedded in the Constitution, it's your right being embedded in popular opinion. And the popular opinion of today, 1901, is that you should not be voting. Okay, which then goes back to Dred Scott. The only difference is that now you have the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments to the United States Constitution, and the Supreme Court is saying that it's the popular opinion that controls versus the Constitution itself, which then lets you know that it's really about white people's attitudes at any given moment. Now, when you go back and examine the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments to the United States Constitution, what you'll find is this. The 13th Amendment was enacted not to stop slavery. The 13th Amendment was enacted to take guns out of black soldiers' hands. You see, at the end of the Civil War, a large number of black soldiers was marching up and down in town with a lot of guns. You know, and so it was no way that you could get those guns out of their hands if you told them they were still in slavery. You see, so in order to take the guns out of their hands, then you had to come up with this fraud and deceit again. You see what I'm saying? That's why I said that the nature is to engage in fraudulent and deceitful activity, and it's always consistent.
Why would you say in this case that was fraud and deceit?
Well, because of the fact that the purpose was never to end slavery. You see, the Civil War was never, in my estimation, I have analyzed this and dealt with it from not only a legal point of view, but history as well as economics. The Civil War was fought to strengthen slavery and not to eliminate slavery. You see, what had happened was slavery had to be nationalized, okay, and it had to operate on a different kind of basis. Slaves were not efficient, economic-wise, working on a plantation, being in perpetual state of slavery. You had to give people some incentive to believe that they were not slaves in order for them to be more productive. You had to make them believe that they were actually a part of something. And so that's what this was about. This was about the European capitalists, the American capitalists, everybody saying, we got a good thing here, but the white man in the South is not operating this thing effectively. You see, so the 14th Amendment to the United States Constitution, which was the most dangerous, that was not an amendment to make you a citizen. It was an amendment in the true sense of the word. Citizenship meaning have rights as well as responsibilities. It was a branding iron to make you national property. So each one of us is running around with a USA brand, you see, on our bodies, being property of the federal government now.
What do you mean property?
Well, in the sense that now, once look, see, it's not a great privilege to have citizenship in a country, because once you have citizenship in that country, you belong to that country.